Okay, so if you choose to do the sidechain processing for task 2, again, I've got 2 different sessions, one called sidechain 1 jazz and sidechain 2 rock. The jazz one is a tune we recorded last semester with one of the jazz groups on campus. The rock one is another tune that we've heard it in class. I think, playing around with the Melodyne on this one. So I've got the jazz one open, and first I'm just going to kind of walk through how to get a sidechain track set up in Pro Tools. So I'm going to choose to use the horn. Again, I made stems for these sessions. Here I gave you a little more freedom. Instead of doing all the drums, I left the kick, the snare, toms, overheads, bass, piano, and the horn, which in this case is saxophone. So, if you want to mess around with the kick or the snare, the toms, obviously there's only certain places you can see where the waveform is bigger, where the toms are actually really coming in. So I just didn't clear all of this out. You could if you want, but just note that if you are going to affect the toms, there's only so many times that the toms come in. Like that. So I'm going to go ahead and do the saxophone just because it's, it's a lead instrument. There's, it'll probably sound cool to put some crazy effects on there. So what I'm going to do is make a new mono aux track. And I'm doing mono because this track is mono. If I was going to use, say, the drum overheads or this toms track, and the toms is stereo because I have them panned a little differently. So if I play this, you'll see on the meter here. So when the high tom hits, it's a little more left, and when the low tom hits, it's a little more right. And that's panning that I have. Sorry, my computer just dinged at me. So that's panning that I had in the original session. So when you record stems, it retains all that panning that you had and whatever processing you might have had on it before. So like on my overheads, you'd hear some of the reverb probably, because the reverb that I was sending to it, I printed along with the stems. That's the idea of printing stems. And we'll talk more about that stuff later. But anyway, I've already gone down a rabbit hole again. I'm sorry, I tend to do that. So I'm going to use the sidechain on the horns. So I'm going to make a new, which is Shift-Command-N, Shift-Apple-N, new mono aux input. I'm going to create it, and it's going to insert that new track right after the one I selected. I'm going to go ahead and call this sidechain, and I'm going to, right now I'm not going to solo safe it. Yeah, I guess I will, because for right now, I just want to hear the horn. I just want to hear the saxophone. Now, I can do all this from the edit window because, we can see our routing and all that, and we can see our inserts. You can choose to see whatever you want. If we had mic preamps controllable in Pro Tools, we could see those. If we had more than 5 inserts, we could choose inserts F through J, all our sends, etc. So I don't have to do this in the mix window, but I'm gonna, just because, this is typically a mix process, a process you would do in mixing, not so much in the recording, so we don't really need to see what's going on here right now. So what we want to do is I want the intention of having the sidechain is so that you can end up getting a blend of your clean track along with the processed track. Okay? And if you remember from class, the purpose of setting it up on an aux track is that if I want, I could then send any track to this aux track and it would go through the same processing. Rather than, and I'm just going to do this real quick to show you, I'm going to duplicate, which is Shift-Option-D. I'm going to duplicate this horn track, rather than just putting plugins on this duplicate track, right? And then blending these two that way, right? Now I'm saying I'm only doing it to this saxophone track. By setting it up on an aux track, I can then send whatever audio I want to this aux track. So that's the point of doing this on an auxiliary track. So I need to get the audio from my saxophone track onto this aux track, and I'm going to do that with a send. So I'm going to send it out. I'm going to send it out a bus. Well, I've got a bunch that are pre-named because there's a lot that I just typically use. So I'm going to just go to one that's not assigned to anything. So if you just scroll down, there's probably 150 buses already pre-made in this on this Pro Tools rig. So I'm just going to choose, it doesn't matter which one. Bus 60 is definitely not being used. I'm just going to choose it. And I like to see so it just popped up this fader. This fader is associated with this bus that we just made. But I like to actually see it in my mix window itself as well. And you can see that if I move it here, it moves that one. These are the same fader, right? And we talked about in class the difference between pre and post fader. So if it's engaged, you can see it's pre. If it's not engaged, it's post. And it's post all of this stuff down here. Meaning, what's happening on this track, if it's post fader, when if my send is all the way down, right? Sorry. Let me backtrack. I'm sending this out bus 60, so I need to tell this auxiliary track, this aux track, to look for bus 60. I need to set the input of this to be bus 60 as well. Okay? So now when I hit play, go to where there's some horn. So there's nothing sending here yet, and that's because my send level is all the way down. As I start bringing this up, we're going to start seeing signal come into our aux track. Right? Now, because this is in post fader, it's not sending out bus 60 until after it's gone through this part of the mix window, of this track. So if I bring this monitor fader all the way down, we're now sending less and less signal out of bus 60. So that's what post fader means. So the signal is going through all of the pan, it's going through the pan, it's going through the solo and mute, it's going through this fader, and then it's going out this send, out bus 60. And so that's what post fader means. And now if I mute it, we get nothing. Even though my fader's up, it cut the signal to my aux track, and that's because all of this stuff right here, the pan, the solo, the mute, these all happen before the fader, before this monitor fader. And nothing's being sent until after this monitor fader, right? Because we are not in pre, we're in post. If I hit pre, now we've got signal. Regardless of this being muted, regardless of where this fader is, has nothing to do with bus 60 now. Because bus 60 is sending the signal out is sending it out before all this stuff. So the more I send it, the more goes to my aux track. The less I send it, the less goes to that aux track. And that's kind of up to you, depending on what you're trying to do with this track, whether you want to send it pre or post. If you want this fader to dictate how much level is going to your aux track, then you'd want it post fader. If you don't want this track to have any bearing on how much signal is going here, then you would put it pre-fader, And the amount of signal going from the saxophone track to the aux track depends completely on the send level. So I hope that makes sense. I hope I explained that well enough. If you still have any questions on that, just let me know. And really, like I said, it's just dependent on what effect you're trying to get out of this, whether you want it pre or post. And I'll just say, in this case, for what I'm going to do, I'm going to put some wacky effects on the saxophone. So in this case, I want to set this up pre-fader, because I want to control how much of this signal is going to my aux track. I don't want it to have anything to do with the level of clean signal that I'm hearing. I want it to have only to do with how much I decide to send that sidechain track. So again, hope that makes sense. We're going to set it pre. This FMP, that stands for follow main pan. The main pan is this. So if I pan this all the way to the left, then this pan is going to determine the panning of this bus 60. Now it doesn't matter, because this is a mono aux track that I'm sending it to. If it was a stereo aux track, I'm just going to do this just to demonstrate. If I put this input at 59 and 60, because it's a stereo track, it makes me choose a stereo input. So bus 60 is technically the right side of this. So, sorry, actually this was not the best of examples. Will it let me send this out stereo? It will. Let's go 5960. Okay, so now I'm sending it out a stereo bus. This is now a stereo aux track. And my pan, when I have follow main pan engaged, it's gonna follow this pan as it sends the signal there. So if I pan it right, it's only on the right side of this aux track. If I pan it left, it's only on the left side. So again, because we have a mono audio track, and I'm just going to send it to a mono aux track. We don't need the stereo. I just wanted to demonstrate what follow main pan means. Okay, so that's the setup. Now all that's left to do is decide what we want to do processing-wise. So one thing that's super common to do with sidechain is compress it. So I'm just going to pick it's kind of a random compressor. I mean, it doesn't matter, whatever you want. Maybe let's go with the LA2A. So this is modeled after a pretty famous compressor called the LA2A. So I'm hearing a blend of both of these, right? There's just the send. There's just the clean. So let's hear just the process track here, the sidechain track. So our gain is going to be how much signal is coming in. Peak reduction is how much it's going to compress this signal. So the more peak reduction, the more it's slamming this signal, the more it's compressing it. And I definitely encourage you to just play around with compressors and just really turn these knobs to extreme so you can hear what it's really doing to that signal. So I'm going to compress the heck out of it. Just cause. And then, I don't know, let's put some crazy, some crazy EQ on it. So I'm just going to grab an EQ. Let's just crank the low end on here, low mids here. And maybe I'll roll off the highs. Why not? So now it's just super dark saxophone here. Okay. What else? I don't know. Let's go. What about a flanger? Get rid of this for now. So you got some different parameters here. You can see the speed of the modulation here. We can increase that. That'll be your rate. So now it's modulating quicker. If you want it to go, if you don't want it to go all the way to extremes, that's your depth. You can have it just kind of fluctuate around a narrower region, narrower bandwidth. There's also delay. The waveform will determine the shape. This one only gives us sine and triangle. So, whatever. And now, I don't know, maybe let's distort it. Let's distort it a little bit. So I'm going to go... Whoa, Pro Tools might crash on me. Nope, there we go. Okay, so that was in harmonic, and there's all these guitar pedal effects. So you can choose whatever the heck you want. There's a lot of different presets in here. Let's put a distortion pedal and see what happens. Ooh, that's crunchy. I'm gonna back down the drive a little bit. Wow, that's super distorted. Let's try something else. Let's try buzz. And you know what? That's just a little much. So I'm going to actually put it, you can adjust the order of plugins too, if I haven't mentioned that before. I'm going to put this distortion before the flanger. So I'm going to move that down. I'm going to put the distortion before the flanger. See if that makes it any more, I don't know, any less crazy. Nope, that's pretty darn crazy. Oh, but now the tone knob does a little more because we're not putting this modulation on before the distortion. So now that does a little more. So that's kind of cool. I mean, now it sounds like Jimi Hendrix almost. So that's actually pretty cool. Obviously, this is not, this is just a demonstration of how crazy you can get with it if you want. And really just to kind of show a few different plug-in options of doing some wacky stuff with these. But let's take a listen. Let's listen to it with the track. Now keep in mind, if you remember, I'm just monitoring the sidechain now. We're not hearing the clean horn at all. And I don't know if it's coming through much on the phone my phone that I'm recording this on, but I mean, it literally sounds like this could be an electric guitar with a bunch of crazy effects on it. So now I'm going to start blending. There's our clean saxophone, and I'm going to pan it back up the middle. I forgot that I'd pan this all the way to the left. If you hold Option and click, it'll pan it right up the middle. Same with a fader. If you have a fader all the way down and you want to bring it up to unity, up to 0, if you Option click, it'll snap that up to 0. So there's our clean horn, and I'm just going to start bringing up this sidechain a little. So even though, again, this is just for a demonstration, I think the flanger is a little too much. I might back this down so you can choose how much mix of the signal is coming in. I'm going to break this down to like 15 maybe. Turn the feedback down a little too. And I'm just going to crank it just so you can hear what's going on. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop it there. That's kind of the basics of sidechain processing. I mean, obviously the setup is, the more, what's the proper word for it? Not really rigorous part of it, but the setup is maybe the part that might be the most confusing. And then from there, it's just whatever processing you want to put on. If you want to make it sound, more realistic, obviously it would just be a matter of maybe some different EQ, maybe some compression and just some slight effects if you wanted to actually use this realistically. If you want to go crazy with it like I just did, you can do that as well. But the point of this task is just to get you familiar with how to set up a sidechain and give you an opportunity to do some crazy stuff if you want to. All right, that's it. Let me know if you need any help with anything or if you have any questions.